Hello everybody, and welcome to a video where I am breaking down the top 10 rares and mythics for new Capenna draft. These are the cards you most want to open in your packs, the ones you hate to see from your opponents, and overall the strongest cards in the format. Before I get to the rankings though, I want to remind you that if you enjoy this video, you can help me out by remembering to click that subscribe button. I'm trying to get to 20,000 subscribers by the end of the summer, so if you want to help me reach my goals and join me on this journey, click the subscribe button below, it's free. Let's get to the list though, starting off with some honorable mentions. First things first, Ob Nixilis, the adversary, 3-mana planeswalker, completely takes over the game when he comes into play, and overall one of the most backbreaking cards to see on turn 3. It really is probably just the worst card to see on turn 3 if they have it as part of an ideal curve out, because it's almost impossible to race the damage from just a couple of Ob Nixilis ticking up, even making the devil tokens. Just absolutely brutal card. The only reason it's not higher on this list is because if you're top decking it in the mid to late game, oftentimes it's going to be a little bit easier for your opponents to manage. In a similar vein to Ob Nixilis, Shakedown Heavy, another terrifying card to see on turn 3. Either you're taking like 12 damage for it, or your opponent just drawing an extra card every turn. Just very strong card, especially early in the game, but again, it does lose some of its utility in the mid game when your opponent is going to have those extra blockers. Still fantastic though, and that's why I wanted to make sure I mentioned them, even though they didn't make it into my top 10. That being said, let's get to the official top 10, starting off with Rafine, Scheming Seer. Another early drop, but it's also quite nice in the late game because the Connive ability is going to let you get rid of your extra lands in the late game. So playing this on turn 3, attacking with a creature, conniving, growing that creature is really powerful, but also late game playing Rafine and then starting to loot away your lands is also quite good, and that's also when you'll have the widest board. So Rafine, just a great card at any stage of the game. It's got evasion, it's got the ability to grow itself or grow your other creatures or just filter through your lands. Just a great card overall. Next is Broker's Ascendancy. This is one of those cards that the first time I read it, I was like, what? Because just giving all of your creatures a +1/+1 counter every single turn is absolutely fantastic. If you have some planeswalkers, throw those into the mix and get some extra loyalty along the way. But basically just getting extra counters every turn on all your creatures is incredible. And if you have this card in your deck, you're totally fine just stalling the game out, putting a bunch of creatures into play, making it hard for your opponent to attack into them, and eventually knowing you're going to drop this card into play, and your opponents are going to be looking at their board state like, well, I can't beat that, especially because enchantments are hard to interact with. Next at number 8 is Elspeth Resplendent. It might seem strange to see such a powerful card at number 8, but trust me, there are some crazy cards in this format, and Elspeth is also a very powerful card. 5-mana planeswalker, its plus ability just makes one of your creatures a Super Saiyan, basically. You can -3 if you don't have a creature to put something into play, and then its ultimate is absolutely fantastic as well. So pretty much just a great card overall. The only reason it's not higher is because if you do have an empty board state, casting it and using the -3 ability is potentially going to leave Elspeth vulnerable to just getting killed, so you do kind of have to have at least one creature in play, so that amount of setup means that I wanted to give her a little bit lower on the ranking list, but still a fantastic card. Planeswalkers in Limited tend to be great. Next up is Zeatora the Incinerator. This card is good with some setup and also just good on its own. 6-mana, 6/6 flyer, ends the game in a hurry. It can also start throwing your creatures at your opponent's face or at your opponent's creatures, so you can start taking down their creatures, getting some treasures, casting your other stuff. It's overall just a very, very powerful card. You're generally going to win the game in 1 or 2 turns after you put Zeatora into play, and that's just a fast clock and just a great card overall. It can also help you come back when you're behind by just being a massive flyer, great blocker, and things like that. So Zeatora, great card, and it's even splashable off of some treasures or things like that, which is another nice upside of the card. Moving on to number 6 is All-Seeing Arbiter. Another 6-drop, another powerful card. It's pretty much just impossible to lose like value when you play this card. You're drawing 2, discarding a card, shrinking one of their creatures for a turn, which is going to buy you extra time to hopefully attack with the All-Seeing Arbiter. 4 toughness is surprisingly resilient in this format. And so overall, our All-Seeing Arbiter just kind of takes over the game. The one gripe against it is potentially vulnerable to removal when you do cast it, but then again, all of these cards tend to be, but I'm just trying to separate it from some of the cards that are higher on the list that are very resilient to removal spells indeed. So this is a very, very powerful card. Coming in at number 6 is definitely not too shabby. You should be taking this card, you should be crushing your opponents with it, and it is also the sort of card when your opponent casts, you're like, oh no, but as you'll see, there are some crazy cards in the top 5. Speaking of which, we start off with Hostile Takeover, one of the most game-breaking cards in the format. Really can just flip a game on its head. It can turn a game that you were losing into a game that you are easily winning, a game that you were winning into one that you are getting crushed in. Basically, you can just use this to save your best creature, kill your opponent's best creature, along with all of the small stuff they have in play, and just absolutely wipe your opponent out. Almost every time I see this card resolved, it just results in the game ending because it just ends up as like a 5-for-1 or something like that. And Hostile Takeover is just one of the scariest cards in the set as a result. Moving on to number 4, Vivian of the Hunt. 6 mana for a Planeswalker is a little bit on the expensive side, but when you cast it, you start churning out 4/4s every turn, and you can even start like drawing cards because you can like flip 5 cards, and if you draw a creature for each one that you see, so you can draw like 1 or 2 cards every turn with the +1 if you do really need to do that, or you have already ticked it down 3 times. But just making a 4/4 Rhino every turn is absolutely fantastic and makes this card one of the more scary ones to play. Basically, if you play it and minus it every turn, you're just getting like 12 power and 12 toughness across 3 bodies on a little bit of a delay. So just really scary card to face down. Moving on to number 3 is Workshop Warchief, another very powerful card. It ranks a little bit higher than Vivian for me just because it comes down on turn 5 and it always pretty much gets the value. 5 mana, gets 3 life, which is just really nice, and then when it dies, you get a 4/4. So really nice, simple card, and the fact that it comes down on turn 5 instead of turn 6 just really cuts a couple turns off the ability to cast the card in the first place, and the life gain can be a really nice buffer. So if you are falling behind in the early turns, being able to just slam a Workshop Warchief is absolutely fantastic, and it even has Trample to boot. So just a fantastic card. Moving on to number 2, you might notice that green is kind of racking up the power in this section. 2, 3, and 4 are all green cards, and Titan of Industry, one of those cards that when you cast it, it's basically impossible to lose the game from that point. You can either gain a bunch of life. You're usually going to be making a 4/4 Rhino and putting a shield counter on the Titan of Industry itself. So you have a 7/7 that's resilient and an extra 4/4. Just absolutely devastatingly powerful, and if you really need to, you can kill enchantments or artifacts, gain some life, but most of the time you're just going to be making a huge board state and a really impossible to kill threat. And this card has reach, so it's not even possible to like chip in and with evasive creatures to get past it. You're going to have to find some way to deal with it, and there really isn't a great answer to it. Which card, though, can beat Titan of Industry? What card comes in at number 1? And that card is Sanctuary Warden. 6 mana for a 5/5 flyer with 2 shield counters on it is absolutely stellar, and when it attacks or enters the battlefield, you can remove a counter, make an extra 1/1, draw a card. The reason this comes in above the Titan of Industry is because the difference between 6 mana and 7 mana is just a little bit nicer for this card because you can cast it slightly earlier in the game, because it's not like a linear thing where you cast your 6 drops on turn 6 and your 7 drops on turn 7. Usually by the time you get to that point in the game, it takes you a couple of extra turns to draw that 7th land. So being able to slam this a few turns earlier does make me think it's the number 1 card, but you're not quibbling. If you get a Titan of Industry, you're going to be absolutely stoked as well. So Sanctuary Warden, just a fantastic card. I would recommend against getting rid of both shield counters on it. Sometimes you might want to get rid of one of the shield counters, but just having that extra protection for your 5/5 creature, it makes it so much harder for your opponent to deal with it and stabilize. So try to keep at least 1 shield counter on the Sanctuary Warden if you can when you are playing with it. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Remember to hit that thumbs up button if you did enjoy it. Subscribe for more content and to join the community, and comment below with your questions, any rares I may have missed that you really like. There were definitely some tough choices that had to be made to cut this down to 10 rares and the honorable mentions. So there were some that I wanted to include that I had to leave out, but I would love to hear which rares are your favorite in the set. And if you did make it all the way to the end of the video, leave hashtag Capenna Crushers to let me know you made it all the way till the end of the video in the comment section down below. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time.